kick things off, we're jumping back 18 years to WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2008. I always remember this feeling like one of the most mechanically satisfying wrestling games, especially in the PS2 era. The controls were tight, with the game opting for right stick for grapples, allowing for some free-flowing offense. The biggest addition to this SVR entry was the various fight styles. With 8 in total, there was some added variety to the matches as you put powerhouses against high flyers, brawlers against technical wrestlers, and submission specialists against hardcore fighters. There was even a dirty fighting style for those who like low blows and ref distractions. Granted, there were 2 major fighting styles that tended to come out on top. Powerhouses due to the no-selling aspect of their moveset, and high flyers because of how quick they could move in the ring. So there was no denying that some fighting styles were much more useful than others, but it still offered a little more variety in the gameplay. Though, we could have done without the stamina gauge. Superstars in 2008 tire out faster than I do when I walk to the fridge during those terrible loading screens. Though SVR 2008 was also the first entry in the series to combine the SmackDown and Raw rosters with the new iteration of ECW. Whilst there is no denying that this mediocre rendition of ECW was not so great to watch, in SVR it did find its place pretty well. It added the ECW superstars to a roster of over 50 wrestlers. I know, slightly smaller than previous titles.
Ooh. That's kind of small.
As well as new title belts, arenas, and additions to the 24/7 mode. However, the reason that SVR 2008 is ranked at number 10 is mainly because of that lackluster 24/7 mode. Instead of the season and GM modes, SVR 2008 merged them into one 24/7 mode. On the surface, this seemed like a great idea. The opportunity to go for different belts, move between brands, and eventually become a Hall of Famer is a classic wrestling fan's dream. In execution though, it did become a bit tedious and very repetitive. Yes, you had the cutscenes and rivalries, but they were often repetitive, and the added training minigames just became a chore to get through. Aside from that and the previously mentioned stamina gauge, SVR 2008 is still a great wrestling game, but there might just be a few more on this list that may be a little better. Hey, thanks for finding this channel. I'm building this from scratch as a one-man team with a single goal, dropping high-quality lists for you every single week. By subscribing now, you aren't just a number, you're an early supporter helping me hit that weekly schedule faster. So thanks for being here. WWE 2K23 is next up on the list, and honestly, this game had a lot to prove after the recent mishaps in the franchise. And it did do a really good job. Whilst most of the changes made wouldn't be considered as major overhauls, they still improved the overall quality of the gameplay. The game introduced new stipulations such as war games, added alternate time pin mechanics, which meant no more button spamming, my thumbs are very thankful for that one, as well as an expanded My GM, Universe, and Creation modes, allowing for more freedom and options in your approach. The highlight in 2K23 is absolutely the showcase. Going through John Cena's history in the WWE as his opponents is an interesting take on the mode. You get to play through his biggest losses in the WWE and pin him to the mat again and again as various different superstars. And of course, by completing these matches, you unlock superstars and arenas to use in other game modes, so that's a nice little bonus. As far as the gameplay, the reversal system has seen a little revamp following 2K22's lead with a more paper scissors rock style of counter. Basic strikes and grapples are still counted on a standard reversal button, but when in a collar-to-collar tie-up or grounded, you have to guess what type of attack your opponent is going to hit you with and press the corresponding light attack, heavy attack, or grapple button. This is actually a pretty decent addition as it means you have to actually try and anticipate what your opponent is going to do. You know, the way reversals would actually work. It is a shame that this meant you can no longer see a chain of counters, but was an interesting way of shaking things up. My one pet peeve with 2K23, and maybe even with the wider 2K series as a whole, is that while some of the major superstars have fantastic character models, some are downright abysmal. I mean, look at Lita here. I don't think you would have known it was her if I didn't say anything. It is just so annoying that in the current generation of PC and consoles, where graphics have never been better, is when we are seeing some of the worst wrestler character models when they're brought into the game. WWE 2K23 may be a little way off from being the best wrestling game on this list, but there's no denying that this is a testament as to how a developer can get things back on track, especially after the disastrous 2K20 and the mixed bag that was 2K22. WWE Smackdown Shut Your Mouth is up next, and honestly, this was the game that really began the new era of WWE games. games. Granted, Just Bring It released a year earlier, but it felt like this was where Ukes were really finding their feet for the, at the time, new console generation. A significant bump in the character models and graphics and expanded backstage areas were just the beginning. The game featured a decent season mode with the option to do a full draft pick at the start of the season. This was honestly pretty cool to see in such an early title, though honestly, we could have done without the random commentary that seems surprised for no reason whatsoever about each GM's pick.
What? What the hell is going on here?
Admittedly, the first-person movement around the arenas before your match is a little strange. Letting you access all sorts of areas like the stock room, boiler room, and even outside the arena was honestly a little random. You could just keep exploring and find yourself completely away from the arena and even take a train to WWE World. And the fact that you could still get back in time for your match is pretty funny. It's cool that they implemented this in such an early entry, though it does feel a little empty at times. Admittedly, the gameplay in Shut Your Mouth is still quite stiff, with the real drawback being the reversal system. Mapped to square on PlayStation, it seemed like it only worked 50% of the time. Now, I understand that as a match goes on, reversing strikes and grapples should get tougher, but right at the beginning of a match, if you time it right, it should work. But a lot of the time, it honestly just doesn't. Though I must admit, the launch strike that you can do when getting off the ground is quite hilarious, but also very useful. There are also a variety of match stipulations to jump into, with a personal favorite being the I Quit match. It realistically may not translate that well to the game, but it reminds me of the match between John Cena and JBL. So yeah, I got a kick out of it. Up next, SmackDown Here Comes the Pain has got to be one of my earliest memories of wrestling video games. At the time, the attitude-filled soundtrack mixed with the high-impact moves that featured frequent replays and cutaways was awesome. Yes, the moveset was fairly rudimentary, and the very simple creation mode in hindsight made it feel a little bare bones, but at its core, it's a very fun wrestling game. I did manage to make a wrestler that constantly skipped leg day, so that is something. The visuals might have aged like fine milk, but the gameplay still holds up. I mean, what other wrestling game lets you climb up the side of a cell with the grace and speed of Spider-Man? Each slam felt impactful, each strike felt weighty, especially the kick to the midsection. The animation mixed with that sound effect is simply perfect.
It was perfect. Perfect.
The game features a very simple season mode where you can choose to blast through matches or talk to the GM and try to get a title match. I did have to laugh about the fact that you can demand a title shot the moment you launch season mode. I captured the US title in my first match, which is honestly pretty bizarre, but still funny nonetheless. Again, the season mode is a little light compared to subsequent wrestling games, but it was one of the earliest titles, so I can't really fault it for that. When I jumped back into Here Comes the Pain, I was surprised by the lack of commentary, and initially this did bother me, but after replaying Shut Your Mouth, I can completely understand why. Sometimes it's better to have no commentary than the inaccurate and nonsensical statements that were made in the previous game. Also, I remember being confused by the fact that despite it being called SmackDown Here Comes the Pain, the Raw roster was still on there. But you know, more superstars is never a bad thing. It may not be the most standout wrestling game in the modern era, but I can't help but look back fondly on Here Comes the Pain, because honestly, it was just such an entertaining experience that often embraced the silly side of wrestling. I am a little biased with this one, but WWE 12 was actually the first wrestling game that I bought for myself on the PS3. It was my first experience of the squared circle in that generation of console, and at the time, I was honestly blown away. One of my favorite features about this wrestling game is the finisher system. The game actually rewards you for pulling off your signature move before initiating your finisher. If you chose to just build up your finisher gauge, you'd still be able to complete the move. However, if you first perform your signature, it turns your finishing move into a super finisher, making it much stronger than it would be on its own. The simplified reversal system here also allows for a decent amount of chain wrestling, as you and your opponent counter move after move. Most of the time, this has been really awesome and led to some authentic looking moments in matches. But at other times, like when you've beaten your opponent to the point where they're clutching their ribs and moving slowly, yet somehow still reverse your finishing move for the third time, can be a little annoying. Creating a finishing move is back in WWE 12, and honestly, I forgot just how many different steps you could combine together before the final impact. I've always enjoyed finisher customization options because, like in the SVR series, it just gave you something to help set your own custom superstar apart, rather than just being another ripoff of The Undertaker. WWE 12 did strip back the game modes to feature only 2 in the form of Road to WrestleMania and Universe mode. Whilst I really did enjoy Road to WrestleMania, even with its sometimes clunky dialogue, Universe mode very much felt like a mixed bag. It was cool being able to manually make superstars feud with each other and getting to watch it play out, but storylines often didn't lead to pay-per-view matches and can end randomly. WWE 12 was still a lot of fun, and I am really fond of it on a nostalgic level, but I can understand why some people found this to be a bit of a mixed bag. Up next, we have WWE All-Stars. Yeah, this one is a little different, mainly due to the absence of any sort of simulation in the game. This is the type of wrestling game that 2K tried and failed to replicate with 2K Battlegrounds. It is that super cartoony, high-impact, arcadey-style wrestling game that makes the WWE feel more aligned with a Tekken game than a true wrestling sim, and it works really well. Returning to the separate blocks and reversal buttons for grapples and strikes makes for a decent challenge when hit by a barrage of punches, kicks, and throws. Reversals are frequent, exchanges are fast, and your opponent just won't stay down, so you have to force them to.
Stay down, bitch.
What made All-Stars really stand out was that it took a break from the traditional wrestling and transitioned to a simplified control scheme that opens up the series to gamers who are more used to other fighting games while still showing off the brutal nature of your favorite finishing moves. What I love most is watching the likes of The Undertaker launch himself and his opponent into the air for a tombstone piledriver, or Rey Mysterio leaping to the sky to do his signature bulldog. These finishing moves go next level with the limits being taken off, and I love it that much more for it. Also, smacking a wrestler over the rope as Big Show is honestly very funny. Seeing all the wrestlers exaggerated for the cartoony style of the game is absolutely hilarious. As if Triple H in his prime wasn't already big enough with his totally legal enhancements, the game decides to swell him up to 3 times his size. As far as game modes go, it isn't nearly as deep as its simulation counterpart, but there are a fun few gauntlet modes that take you through a very light story and a bunch of challenging matches. Paul Bearer's introduction to The Undertaker is a particular highlight here. The one major criticism I have with All-Stars is that the roster is tiny in comparison to other games in the WWE series. I understand that THQ was going for something a little different with this entry, but it would have been nice to see a few more inclusions. Still, the whole Legends versus Superstars angle is pretty decent, giving you the opportunity to face off in challenges comparing Legend and new archetypes to see who wins out, and it was definitely something a bit different. Next on the list, WWE 2K26 continues the momentum of the recent 2K entries with another fantastic game. The key to what landed 2K26 on this list was not just making major changes, but also the subtle tweaks that made each match feel that much more fun, whilst also maintaining a sense of authenticity. One big overhaul was once again the reversal system. Though whilst keeping things mechanically similar to previous entries, it has its own stamina system that prevents opponents, as well as you, from being able to spam reversals like there's no tomorrow. The rest of the gameplay elements have been relatively similar to previous entries, but it's the addition of things like ragdoll physics, new moves, new stipulations, and the return of some classic matches have helped to mix things up. The Scrapyard match is a fun new match type that will have you running around a junkyard, getting springboarded to higher areas to find a bunch of weapons to smack your opponents with. It's silly and very entertaining. The return of the Inferno and I Quit matches are also a welcome one, though being able to exit the ring during an Inferno match is a little unusual. With the ragdoll physics, wrestlers will take bigger bumps to certain moves, which helps to heighten the drama of a match. Wrestlers now react to being dropped on weapons, so if you chokeslam someone on a chair, they will feel it. Drop them on a ladder, it will hurt. This isn't the biggest change out there, but it's one of those quality of life improvements that just makes sense. In previous entries, if there happens to be a weapon in a position where you have just dropped your opponent, it would just get pushed aside. So it is good to see a bigger impact here. Also, now there are thumbtacks. And yes, you can spread them around the ring and powerbomb wrestlers right through them. Mick Foley would be proud. It's also a bit of fun messing around with the pyrotechnics in wrestler entrances. Not that it makes a whole lot of difference to the overall experience, but it's a bit of a laugh trying to get the pyrotechnics just right with a superstar's actions, only to have them miss it dramatically. In recent years, the main reasons to play the 2K series has been its My Rise and Showcase modes, and 2K26 is no different. Offering a new story to take your custom superstar through whilst making allies and rivals is a treat, and it's all done with your fallen wrestler, the Archetype, who's looking to make their big return to the WWE. The Showcase mode, on the other hand, focuses on some of CM Punk's biggest matches and allows you to play through his wrestling history. Both these modes have presented so well and are entertaining to go through. There's also been more effort put into the voice acting this time round. It seems like wrestlers and announcers put more time into their performances, and it really helped. 2K25 struggled from some woeful voiceover work, so it's nice to hear the WWE superstars doing decent work for a wrestling game. For this next entry, I'm stepping back into the ropes of the SmackDown vs. Raw era of wrestling games with WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2010. This was definitely one of the most feature-rich and customizable WWE games that I ever played, and honestly, it was awesome. Road to WrestleMania makes up the main story mode with 6 different storylines to play through. You get to play as legends such as Randy Orton, Edge, and Mickie James as they push through their rivalries and tensions to win their respective titles. And yes, you even play a unique storyline for your created wrestler. On the other hand, career mode was more of an afterthought in this entry, focusing on taking a current superstar or created wrestler through matches to upgrade stats, unlock abilities, and attempt to attain all available titles. It lacks any sort of storyline and works as more of a rinse-repeat formula to build up your wrestler. What really sets SmackDown vs. Raw 2010 apart for me was the deeper customization options available as compared to the previous iterations of the series. Being able to design your own storylines and have full control over scenes and the flow of various matches was an absolute treat.
Nice.
But it is the expanded moveset customization that really caught my attention back in the day. Capitalizing on 2009's creative finisher and adding position variations to include alternative standing as well as diving moves was awesome. Being able to choose exactly how your wrestlers mount the turnbuckle, leap in the air, spins, if you feel so inclined, helped each finisher feel fresh and new. Now, each created superstar was truly unique with their own finishing moves, rather than just being another random skin that does a spear and a chokeslam. Honestly, I also really like the menu in this entry. Yeah, I know how boring that sounds, but the fact that the tutorial and training is integrated into the menu was an interesting idea. Instead of picking a match, you could just spend a bit of time getting familiar with the controls without having to look for a place to practice. It's actually pretty neat. For the penultimate entry on this list, when you think of WWE 2K14, I'm sure you think of only one thing: 30 years of WrestleMania, the mode that built off the previous year's Attitude Era, showcasing legendary matches across 4 iconic eras of WWE. This was something truly special that would go on to become a featured mode in the 2K series, aptly named the Showcase. This mode gained a lot of praise for its innovative and nostalgic approach to the storylines. But that's not all. You also get to defend the iconic streak at WrestleMania, which is much more difficult than it sounds, taking on a gauntlet of challengers as The Undertaker and attempting to come out on top. If that's not enough, you can also attempt to defeat the streak and take on The Undertaker in one of the most difficult one-on-one matches in any WWE game.
Tonight, you will go one-on-one with The Undertaker.
It's honestly crazy how many times I was in control of the match, finisher after finisher, chair shot after chair shot, and suddenly I was in Hell's Gate tapping out for the 100th time. Now, there's no denying that 2K14 carried on the innovations from WWE 12 and 13, with Yuke still at the helm despite the change in publishers. This was 2K's opportunity to make a big impression, and honestly, they really did. Featuring a very expansive list of creation options, if you haven't noticed yet, I do love my customization options, with special moves, championships, and even your own story. Also, the gameplay loop is as fluid as ever. There was a bunch of extra animations added to improve the flow of the wrestling and remove some of the clunkiness from the previous title. For my final entry, and yes, I'm slightly biased, WWE Smackdown vs. Raw 2006. For me, this is everything a wrestling game was meant to be, with the awesome Seasons mode that takes place across 2 years, spending a year at either brand, allowing you to take a custom superstar or one of the many wrestlers on the roster through various storylines to capture each brand's prized belts. SVR 2006 also featured the first iteration of GM mode, having you draft wrestlers, book shows, manage contracts, and compete for ratings to become the GM of the year. Back when it released, however, the real surprise was the large list of match stipulations. Featuring the likes of 10 and 20 men Royal Rumbles, Buried Alive, and Last Man Standing matches, there were also updates to special guest referee matches, the return of Hell in a Cell, and one other new match type that I can't seem to remember. If you do, naughty. Well, moving on. SVR 2006 was absolutely stacked full of features. With over 100 different stipulations, there were so many ways to completely decimate your opponents and get the 1, 2, 3. Also, despite being a 20-year-old game, somehow a lot of the wrestlers' character models seem to actually look closer to their real-life counterparts than even some of the recent WWE games. 2K20 anyone? Admittedly, the control scheme does make things feel a little outdated, with some of the mechanics feeling a little stiff. Irish whips and running offense in particular just don't seem to land right at times. However, this can be easily overlooked overlooked due to how fun the game is overall. My personal highlight is the season mode because honestly, it is one of the best culminations of storylines out of any WWE game. From the locker room theft and Royal Rumble story arcs to the voice acting actually sounding well done, not just a lazy contractual obligation that some other WWE titles have featured, SVR 2006 was the complete wrestling experience. If you enjoyed this list, make sure to click the video on screen to see more top 10 gaming lists. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button and we'll see you in the next one.